What's up, y'all? This is Dave,
And this is Devin.
and you're listening to the Dave and Dev podcast.
Dave and Dev, gotta keep it real like Dave and Dev. On my job like Dave and Dev, tell no lie like Dave and Dev. Some days I wanna stay in bed, but I get ready for the day ahead. I wanna complain, but I pray instead. Then I'm on my way to the Dave and Dev, and it go like, I don't need a crew, don't play by he say, she say rules. Complain, no, we can't do. I'd rather have faith while G-O-D make moves. So please stay cool. All I do is speak the truth on things I see they do. I'm a sinner myself, no lie, I need grace too. We lit like EKU, yeah.
Hey, what's up, Devin?
Yo, what's going on, Dave? How you been?
Man, I'm good. It's good to see your face, bro.
It's crazy. So now everybody can see I don't got that fresh cut confidence right now, but I'm gonna get it back. Don't worry, I'm gonna get it back.
It always comes back, bro. It always comes back.
Yeah, we trying something new this season.
Yup.
Kind of cool. Doing a little video thing. So we get to. So when we talk about merch, we can show you the merch.
Hey.
Right. Yeah, this is just something that we want to try out, try to up our game a little bit, but I'm excited for it, Dave. And I can actually see your reaction when something crazy happens.
Yeah, this is true, man. What better way to, kind of keep our little, thing going to be able to see us. So that's dope. Shout out to the newest member, the only member of the Dave and Dev team, not named Dave and Dev. Shout out to our producer, Mr. Chris Bailey. Welcome to the team. We're super excited to have you on. He's got tons of cool creative ideas, and he's really helped us make this video chatting work.
We got to get Chris some kind of nickname or something. Like it's got to, it's Dave, Dev, and Chris don't really got a really good
one. Nah. We'll think of something. Maybe we'll do like a little Instagram poll or something. We need to get Chris on the show, and then people can get to know him, and then we can create a nickname.
I need Chris to be the fact checker. Because, some people are coming on here saying reckless stuff. I need him to do a fact check.
Dude, he needs to be the fact checker for me and you sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we got a lot to talk about in this episode. But first, man, let me say congrats to you, my friend. As a lot of you guys know that watch that listen to the episodes, Devin and I are both Ohio State fans. So we got Buckeyes on Monday playing against Bama. But shout out to Devin's Cleveland Browns. Steelers game tomorrow. What's your prediction?
This is going to be an emotional roller coaster of a weekend for me as a sports fan.
Facts.
Not only do the Browns get in barely by beating the Steelers last week, now you got to play them again this week. And it's the bitter rivalry. So that's going to be insane. But then the next day, we got Ohio State versus Alabama. And I know I don't talk about this a lot, but my granddad is the biggest Alabama football fan in the world. Dave, we really got to get him on the podcast one day.
For real.
I think like this man is the biggest, like he could tell Nick Saban what to do. Like that man has been a fan forever. And if they lose, if Alabama loses, let me just say this. Last time Alabama lost to Ohio State, I talked to my granddad like every weekend. I didn't talk to him for like 4 months. He was just still recovering from it. So I'm gonna need him to to get on here and just eat some crow while he's on here with the Buckeyes.
Right. Listen, man, I'm super hyped for the game on Monday. They looked great against Clemson, man. We were all over Trevor Lawrence. If we can apply that pressure.
Him that one though. He needed that one.
Yeah, we were all over him, man. The pressure that we applied from the D line. Justin Fields played amazing. Like
I mean,
that.
just think about it. If you Justin Fields, though, you've been hearing all season long how this dude is better than you, and then yeah, you got to go out there and show him something.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they did it.
I listen. I'm glad he did too. What do you have? 6 touchdowns? Something crazy.
I mean, dude, it's been such a crazy season, COVID and all. Ohio State having half of a season. First off,
Right.
wasn't gonna have a season, then they're gonna have a season. It's wild. Yeah, so that's been crazy. I mean, we already got one win. Michigan hired back Harbaugh, so that's a good win for us. So congratulations, y'all. Just
That's
keep
a
on doing
guarantee.
what you do.
5 more wins?
There you go.
Shoot. But no, seriously, I like super excited for that game on Monday. I'm actually going to be cheering on your Browns tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. By the time this podcast airs, both those games will probably be over. We're excited to chat about those. If you don't, first of all, I know we plugged the merch earlier. daveanddev.com, by the way. No, we got our own site these days. But the other thing I want to plug is if you're on Facebook, go hit up our Facebook group. So we have the Dave and Dev podcast Facebook page. It's like where we share our posts, all that stuff. But we also have like a chat group. It gets super live in there. It's fun times. We love to post polls on there. If a game's coming up, like, we'll ask, who you guys got, what are the odds, blah, blah, blah. So we like to have a good time on there. We talk a lot about, mainly sports on that page. But yes, fun times. If you are not a part of that group, go join that. And also we'll plug our IG page at Dave and Dev. So hit that up. Go take a look at our posts. We'll be posting these videos on IGTV. So super hyped for what we got on the way, man. Lots of fun stuff, lots of cool stuff in 2021. Lots of cool stuff in January. So be on the lookout for that.
I'm excited about some of the interviews that are coming up.
Yeah, we got
really
some
cool ones that are coming up.
We got some cool interviews on the way. Super hyped for those. So, man, I say we get into it. First episode of 2021. It's Saturday, January 9th. And if you were not under a rock this week, you know what happened. You know what went down on January 6th, 2021. Arguably, honestly, like I kind of reflected at the end of the day. Like, I don't know that I've ever been through a more like, obviously I wasn't there, but a more like this is going to be remembered in history for like ever day than that right there. Maybe.
You went through, 9/11.
9/11, yeah. But I mean like that I was like coherent watching like an adult, like this is crazy. Like, so Devin, can you just lay out what happened, what went down from like a 30,000 feet view? If we're listening to this in 5 years, what did we see from kind of the outside looking in?
Yeah, so basically there was a Save the Vote protest that was scheduled and in support of President Donald Trump, and who recently lost the election in November. And the protest turned into a riot when protesters decided to take over the Capitol building in DC.
And if I'm not mistaken, sorry to cut you off, weren't they about to do the like final electoral college, like not voting, but like vote on the vote?
Yeah, so that's what they can and this is when we need our official political analysis on here of Daniel Bennett, but they were solidifying the votes. So like this is when like all the counts have been done, the recounts have been done, and these are officially submitting the ballots for each state about who will be the president come January 20th.
14 days from then. What, 12 days from now, 11 days from now?
11 days from today. So yeah, it was wild. I mean, I found out the news. I had a buddy, he just called me and said, "Yo, are you watching this?" I'm like, "Watching what?" He said, turn to the news." I'm like, "Which news station?" He's like, "Any of them." He said, "They're trying to take over the Capitol." I was like, "Who is they?"
Right.
I turned this on. I'm like, "Yo, this is wild." So that was, I mean, it was weird. So I went through several different emotions while watching it. And it was kind of like odd because you didn't know what was going to happen,
Right.
like how long this was going to happen. I didn't even know like why it started, how they even got there in the first place. Because by the time I turned on TV, they were already in the Capitol building.
Right.
And I didn't know how many people were in there, what they were doing in there. Like, I don't know. It was weird. So that,
So
I mean, go ahead, Dave.
yeah, and it's funny because you had somebody call you and you called me because I was driving and I was like, yo, what? Like, hold up. Because I feel like before I left the house, I knew that they were like protesting. Like all
Yeah, I
people
mean,
are always
yeah,
protesting in DC. Like if
yeah,
you've ever been to
DC.
Washington, DC, there's somebody outside the Capitol building, the White House, with a picket sign protesting something. Like it might be one person, it might be 1,000, whatever. So I was just like, okay, it's a protest. But when you called me and you were like, yo, this is not a protest anymore. Like this is crazy, right? So I really want to I want to flesh out some of those things that you were feeling. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the different emotions that you felt on the 6th, kind of what you've been thinking and processing through after that time? I'd be really curious to kind of get your perspective on that.
Yeah. So the first thing that came to mind, obviously, was like, I noticed, all right, these are a bunch of these are Trumpsters, or this is like the MAGA culture. Like
Right.
this isn't Republicans. This is Trumpsters. Okay, Trumpism is what you hear it called as a lot.
Mhm.
And like I knew that there was like he had a big following, but I didn't know that following was like that. Like,
Right.
so, um, and I mean, like, granted, there's people on the fringes on each side,
Sure.
but for this day, this was the worst. Like, if the BLM riots in the summertime was the worst of the left, then this was the worst of the right.
For sure.
And so the first thing that came to mind was that, okay, this is Trumpism, and look at what this has caused. And so I'm like thinking, like, did he say anything, do anything to make people think like this or want to do this? And of course, he's been saying that, these are illegitimate votes and all these different things. We've talked about this forever. I told Daniel on the podcast several months ago, if you haven't heard it, this is one of my biggest fears going into the podcast or going into the election, is that the president would not legitimize the votes,
Right.
and he would just keep trying to say it's a fraud. And so what happens when you call democracy a sham? People freak out,
Yeah.
because it's what our country is built on. So that was the first thing. Like, okay, this is Trumpism in effect. Second thing is, I'm thinking, okay, you look at the headlines and people are having their, you see the protesters are at a standoff with police officers in Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
So my thought goes back to the Black Lives Matter protest before, where the president just around the corner tear gassed a bunch of protesters to go take a photo shoot in front of a church.
Right.
Which kind of leads into my third point, but I'll get there in a second. But we're seeing two different worlds right now. And I know it's going to rub people the wrong way, but it's the truth. Like, there was an obvious different reaction from how this was handled and how other things were handled. So that was
It
I
was
was thinking about
striking,
that.
right? Like it was
Huh?
striking at first to see just kind of the nonchalant. I don't know. I mean,
Well, how did you get, like, if you've been to DC, you can't get on the steps. So how did it get this far?
Yeah.
And if this group supposedly backs the blue, how is this backing the blue by trampling them over in an
I
officer?
think that too. Yeah.
And so like I just don't understand like at what cost? And so point number 3 was what I want to make is you started to see like the Jesus saves and Jesus 2020 flags. And this isn't CRT. This isn't critical race theory. This like this isn't this is straight up people who are doing this in the name of Jesus and so anytime in your theology you say Jesus and, that and is an idol.
Right.
And if Jesus is Lord, then Jesus is over everything. And so when I started seeing like the Jesus and Trump stuff going on, it's like this is Christian nationalism, and this is how bad it's gotten to the point.
Right.
Like it's seeped in our churches, and it's seeped to make people think that this man is really like the quote unquote chosen one.
Right.
So all those feelings combined together, I started to feel like sad, and then I started to get really, really upset, like angry, looking at it like this is ridiculous that we have got to this point in this country that this is where we're at. Like, think about this, Dave. Like, I've had several conversations with people after, or like during this protest and like after, like the aftermath of it. And one person told me that he didn't vote for Trump in 2016 because he thought he was going to go off the rails. And so after seeing some of the policies and whatnot, like, yeah, his language and stuff wasn't great, but you say, okay, this guy is moving towards the right direction. He said he voted for him in 2020, but after seeing that on January 6th, it was more like this is who I thought he was going to be in 2016. Yeah. And the person told me that if I could take my vote away, like somehow, some way, I would say I would have not voted. I would have voted third party.
Right.
And so it's almost, I mean, screw it. I'm just going to be blunt. Like, so we're single issue voters here, on these issues. Like we wanted to get the Supreme Court justice. We wanted to get these policies in play, and I get it, but at what cost?
Right.
Like what was it worth it? Like because we don't know what this Supreme Court justice is going to do. We don't know if it's going to flip the scales or not. We don't know what kind of policies are going to be brought up.
Right.
Like, was all of it worth it to get the Capitol building attacked? Because that's what it was.
Right.
And so there's a lot of aftermath and stuff that we're still figuring some things out. Like I just saw like Twitter just got rid of Trump's profile, and Facebook did too, and YouTube gets rid of Steve Bannon for doing conspiracy theory stuff. And that's a whole different, like, well, I'm sure we'll touch on that today.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that in a minute.
But it's just like, at what cost was all this? Like, was it really worth it? Because to me, it's not really like I don't think that like that was a sad day for Americans. Is that like we're so divided that someone goes into another politician's office and says we're not done, trashes the office, steals the podium, all these different things, and it's just like this is where we're at in our American dignity. So that's kind of my feelings on that day.
Yeah, I definitely share a lot of those same feelings. And, one thing I'd like to say, Devin, too, is I really would urge people to be cautious on conspiracy theories. We've touched on this before. If you want some good resources for this, KB and Amin Hudson, their Southside Rabbi podcast, did a really good episode on conspiracy theories. There's tons of good resources from, good Christian leaders out there. Just be really cautious on this. And I'm saying that because one of the first things that people are going to say when they see this episode is, oh, well, what about you said this is the extreme part of the right. What about Antifa? Blah, blah, blah. And could they have been a part of it? Maybe. I never rule anything out. However, we have evidence. We have lots of hard evidence that people that were inside of the Capitol building that got arrested were people that had previously attended Trump rallies. Their social media was, full of Trump support, and that's fine. I'm just stating that, like before we jump to say conspiracy theory things.
I mean, the thing is,
let's just say that.
Could there have been Antifa people? Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
But the majority of the people there, I'm not talking about your conservative people.
Correct.
I'm talking about people who are involved in Trumpism.
Correct.
I'm going to call it for what it is. It's a cult. So if you are involved in Trumpism and you claim Christianity, the two cannot intermingle.
They can't. Just like you can't claim to, be fully invested in, communism or socialism, or these are worldly structures. And we're talking about an outer worldly thing in Christianity, right? Like that we cannot be tied to worldly structures like that, right? That are imperfect when we know the perfection of Christ, right? And so anyway, I wanted to say that before we kind of moved into the next space, right? Because it's really important to understand that we have to be cautious, and we have to understand that there are conspiracies out there. There are things that happen that are dark and twisted and evil. We know that there's an adversary, right? Like the Bible talks repeatedly about the adversary. We know all that. We know that we're going to be persecuted. Like we know all that, but we just have to be cautious, and we have to call things like we see them and as we see them in front of us. And what we saw was at the core before the rioting was a lot of people in DC for a Trump rally, and things escalated. Like I watched this video today from Insider. It blew my mind because these people were like filming in the middle of they were kind of going into these different pockets of different, supporters, and you could see the escalation. People are like, oh, I heard they're going to go to the Capitol. Oh, I heard they're going to go to the Capitol and do what? They're going to raid the Capitol. And people are like, what? Oh, okay. And like you start seeing people move forward, and I was like, yo, this is not organized, right? Like this is These are people that are getting escalated, right? Like think about it. Like me and you, we both went to, we both ran in circles with athletes, right? We both played sports. What happened when your boy on the team was, somebody was talking about him, right? It was chatter. Hey, yo, I heard they're going to fight, right? I heard this is going to go down, right? I heard that, after third period, between lunch, somebody's going to get punched, right? And what happens? People, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'll never forget leaving a festival ready to fight people. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm just saying that as a point that like, nobody is beyond this, right? Like, I'm not saying that if you're sitting here listening today and you're a conservative person that voted for Donald Trump, that you would have done this. But what I'm saying is nobody is not capable of doing it, right?
Yeah, and I want to add on to that too. So I want to be careful with what I'm saying. This isn't an indictment on all Trump supporters.
Facts.
Because this isn't all Trump supporters. Right. Like, based off of the information you had going into November's elections, I believe that most reasonable people made the best decision of what they could for the time being, whether that be Biden or Trump or some kind of third party. They did what they could.
Right.
I'm more concerned about the conspiracy theory part of this that led people to think that they were really being robbed of something, even though countless amount of evidence proves otherwise.
Right. So
like I get it. So like I'm with Trump, like putting together all these different lawsuits to try to figure out. Like, hey, listen, if it's the truth, I want the truth to come out. Facts. No matter who it is for or against. Right. That's what it is.
Right.
So I'm not upset about that. I'm upset about spewing this, that it was stolen from you with no evidence to back it up. And people people just blindly going forward with like and following this. Like, do you know how crazy life would be right now? Like, if people really stole this election, yeah, they need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent. But like Daniel said in our podcast before we took break, the chances of that happening are so unlikely. It would be the biggest scandal in American history.
Right.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
I mean, and I encourage people to go back and listen to that episode if they think that, hey, Devin doesn't know politics. Okay, listen to the guy who does know politics,
Right.
and he'll tell you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's a good transition point though too, Devin. So you mentioned this earlier. We got to touch on it. Today, the Apple App Store and Google Play took Parler off their app stores for download. Yesterday, Twitter and Facebook, which I think that actually happened prior to yesterday, but officially Twitter and Facebook shut down Donald Trump's account. So let's talk a little bit about censorship. I would love to get your opinion on it. I think we may have a little bit of slight differences in how we view this, but I really want to hear what you have to think about that.
Yeah, and this is where like I'll confuse people with my views here. I just think that like all censorship is bad, and people, then the response automatically is, well, what about hate speech and other stuff like that? Like, well, if you're going to incite an emergency situation, like you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, of course, right? But I think the correct response to bad speech is better speech. And I think that was happening on social media platforms. So there was bad speech that was coming out, but there were people who were combating bad speech with better speech. And so, but if you take away this bad speech, if you just block it from even saying anything, then automatically bad speech becomes the martyr, and they feel like they have a cause.
It furthers the conspiracy that they're being held back.
Exactly. And so that's why, like, I think that, and I mean, it's a broad blanket, I understand, but I think, like, I wouldn't have taken him off of Facebook and Twitter. And I know that, I mean, people say, well, I mean, do you feel bad for this man? Like, at what point does, like if big tech is going to start regulating speech and clearly violating, and I get it's a private company, but clearly violating First Amendment rights, then that brings in a whole other issues there, because there's people who say a lot worse things than the president did who are still allowed to tweet and do whatever.
Right.
I mean, they may not be as popular. They may not have the 82 million followers or whatever he had
or something.
Yeah. So like they may not have that, but they still say terrible things that could make people act.
Yeah.
So at what point is it bad enough? Is it bad because you don't like it? Because I don't think that, I mean, like, is Donald Trump directly responsible for the actions of these people? Yes and no. Like, yes, because he spewed the conspiracy theories, but no, because they're all grown adults and they decide to act like that themselves.
Right.
I mean, because if that's the case, I mean, I think it was back in like 2014, there was a man in Dallas who shot a police officer in the name of Barack Obama. Right. So should Obama still have a Twitter? People murder for his name.
Right.
So it's like, at what what is bad? Like, at what point is it bad?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my stance is on that.
For sure. I actually think we probably align more than I initially thought. I definitely, you bring up the point about the crowded theater. Should somebody be able to yell fire? Like, no. Censorship is a scary thing, right? And I think that I will say I liked the fact that social media platforms put out notices around election theories and coronavirus things. Like, that to me is not censorship.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's a fact check, and that's cool, because the truth needs to come out.
Yeah, and even if it wasn't a fact check, just the little tag, and I know it seems so stupid, you probably hate seeing it, like it takes up your screen, whatever. But like when somebody says something and they have that kind of follow shit, hey, just a heads up, this is unproven, or hey, this is a fact about the election. If you want more information, here's a .gov site to go to, right? When you were in school, high school, college, and you were doing research papers, like if you didn't get your information from a .org or a .gov, like it didn't matter. It was a wrap. Like, oh, this, you cited this from where? Nah, that ain't, get out of here. You know what I'm saying? Like you are like about to get your doctorate. Like when you cite things, like it's got to be like at least close to legit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so what it's saying is, hey, look, like what is coming, what you're seeing on your screen is a statement of opinion, right? Just a heads up. I will say that I think that, because I have a really hard time with this. Like, I think that he should be held accountable for his words, right? Because if you listen, you go way back in the Waybackometer to 2019, you and I spent 2 hours of podcasting with a series titled Words Matter, right? Words matter. And people can and should be held accountable for their words, okay? However, let me reel it back in here, is that to your point, bad speech should be combated with good speech. Bad speech should be combated with factual speech. Bad speech should be combated with anything that needs to happen to, hopefully say, hey, this is bad speech, right? Because the problem is that bad speech to you and I is different from bad speech to somebody that's a far right-wing extremist who sees let's go to the Capitol as a challenge, right? Who sees that like, oh, we meeting up at 4:00 after school? Yeah, that's a challenge. That's a bet, right? Whereas like to somebody else, that's like, oh yeah, that's bad. I'm gonna hop the bus, right? Like I'm out. So that's where it's super important that we strive to educate ourselves and strive to see where information is bad and speech is bad. But I think censoring it furthers the fact that the people that are the people that I have heard that are kind of in this realm of Trumpism, they feel as though they're not being heard. And this furthers that idea that like, oh, we're not being heard. And the like kind of leader of our thought tribe is now being censored. Oh, so we're all going to be censored. Okay. Like anarchy. Like in a way, like that's what people think, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we don't have, like, tech is fairly new in the whole scope of history. Like,
so regulations.
Yeah. So we don't have anything that outlines what we can say outside of you just can't threaten somebody. You know what I'm saying?
There's not a lot of precedent for it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like taking Parler off of the Google and Apple, to me, it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Like you're just going to make people, they're going to figure out a way how to get on there anyway.
Yeah.
And you're going to make people feel like they're doing something that's kind of like in secret, or like, right. Or they feel like they're doing this for a good cause.
Yeah.
Seriously, I use Twitter as one of my primary social media platforms nowadays. I mean, if somebody just took away Twitter or like from the app stores, people still figure out a way how to get back on there. It'll be all right. I mean, let them talk the way they want to talk. I mean, but if it's a bad idea and it gets out into the public sphere, it'll get combated by a better idea eventually.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree. I just think it's really important that, like, people understand. I think that there's some important things, right? Like one thing is you just mentioned it, like these tech companies, they are privatized, right? Like it is their space to monitor what is in that space. So like, let's just say that at the core, like this is not like, now, again, as regulations come through, could something like this be deemed illegal? I believe it could be, but I don't really want to talk here nor there because it's really, at this moment, it's not relevant. But it's really important to understand that, like, they are within. I mean, back in the day, I think like when I remember when I first had a Twitter, if you tweeted a certain amount of things about certain something, they put you in Twitter jail. I remember like Rich Duffield, I think he tweeted so much just in general that they put him in Twitter jail. But it's one of those things that like they kind of have been censoring people for a long time within their own guidelines, right? And at the end of the day, that's what people have to realize is that within their guidelines, they could cut off your account tomorrow. It doesn't matter what you post. You could be posting. It doesn't matter. Like, I know people are going to like pigeonhole this to this is an effort to hush right-wing folk.
But honestly, that's what it feels like.
It does feel like, that's what I'm saying is that I want people to see that like it feels that way, and it probably is sort of that way in this moment, but they have been doing it. It's within their kind of
at this point in my life, I don't really truly identify with any party like wholeheartedly,
right?
But like it feels like do I feel bad for Trump that's losing? No, I don't. To be honest with you, I don't feel bad that he's losing his Twitter.
Right.
But I'm just what makes me more upset is the precedence that is setting.
Right.
And so that's what I'm trying to.
And I agree. And so I think at the end of the day, what we're saying is that like this, like censorship is a scary thing, because if we can just hush people's ideologies out, if we can flush them out, we'll do it. And I think
because what happens when Christians start getting censored
exactly
on these platforms? I mean,
and here's the thing though about that. Like, I think what's important to note is that like, and this is something I've been thinking about. Sorry, it might be a little off topic from what you were going at here, but like we're told we're going to be persecuted, right? And I'm not sitting here saying we roll over and let it happen, but what I'm saying is that like if you are surprised by the fact that we may be persecuted in some way, shape, or form, like newsflash, it's all over the Bible. It's in there. But secondly, like we're called to, be loving in that space and do everything we can to share the good news and to be people that take that persecution and we tell people about the gospel, right? What we don't do is we don't sit here and throw all that away by going and being violent and we said this about BLM, like, let's protest, but like, let's be, you know what I'm saying?
But yeah.
It's just important to understand that like we're called to be in a space that says, hey, look, like, yeah, we might be getting persecuted. So let's be tighter knit in our groups. Let's be tighter knit in the word, and let's bring people into the fold and show them what being kingdom people look like, not American people look like, because that's hard.
Yeah, and that's like a thing. Like, so it's, do you vote against your own interests because you know you're going to get persecuted? I don't think so. It's like, so as Christians, as much as we can, given the binary choices in this country, we vote for the most that we think will bring heaven on earth.
Right.
But knowing that in the back of our minds that it's not going to get done. It's going to get worse.
And that's the important part, is that like what's so insane to me is that there are people that for the last 5 years have hung their hat on a presidential candidate and a party. And I'm assuming that the party has been going on for a lot longer, right? Like, you know, but
and I get it. I mean, it's the one party that claims God and country.
Yeah.
So the fact that like we talk about this party so much on this podcast is because it's the one party that claims to be the party that represents God and country. So if we have critiques of it, that's because they're claiming to represent my God that I love and my country that I love. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to have critiques. Now the other party has a ton of problems too.
Yeah.
And we talk about those when times are necessary.
And we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, but this is the relevant subject right now that we have to talk about about this side of things, but all in all, to say that, like, yeah, that day a couple days ago, January 6th, set a whole bunch of things in motion, and it's going to be interesting to see how these next couple days play out.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I want to say too is that, for me, I see a lot of people talking about the censorship. I see a lot of people talking about comparing it to BLM protests and things like that. What I really want to point out, and I hope everybody can kind of take a step back and kind of go to like this, like, I'm gonna look at this through a telescope, or look at this through a little bit wider angle lens here, is that, like, people, this was a dangerous act of violence. No matter who you think did it or didn't do it, this was an act of terror, just straight up. And it's a day that, like, we should look at and say, we don't want this to ever happen again.
But you got to look at, Dave, and I agree with you, but you got to look at why these things happen. Because at the BLM protest, there was some acts of terror that happened. There were just terrorizing white people just because of their being. But here's the issue. Why did they start? What was the inception of both of these protests? One protest started because we said they feel like the vote was stolen from them, while the other one was protesting for just human dignity. So when people say, yeah, they were both like the same, they were not the same. Correct. And I know I mentioned this the first time. Here's the problem with these protests, is that you had a group of people who felt emboldened enough to go into our nation's Capitol building, steal the podium, put feet on desks, do all these different things. It was a slap in the face, because I saw people get rubber bullets and tear gas in. They stood on a standoff with these people for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And one person, like, got shot in the neck, that lady who got shot. Yeah. Right. And I think they said it was like 5 people total that died and 52 people that were injured and whatnot, which is terrible. I don't want anybody to face that type of violence or whatever. I'm not asking, this is a social media post that happened, and I agree with it. I'm not asking these police officers to shoot everyone that on site. I'm asking you to show the same level of restraint when it happens. And this so ironically happens the day after Jacob Blake's ruling, right, that who gets shot 7 times in the back for trying to go into his car, but we allow people like these people to just feel emboldened enough to go into a Capitol building. Right. So I get it. Like, Jacob Blake was in the wrong. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have walked away. He shouldn't have put his back towards the officers in that situation. But, like, if we're gonna have the patience to just let a group of people go into the Capitol building, and that's the precedence that we're sending now, it needs to be all across the board. Period.
That same energy.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it from anyone else. And I mean, there's several layers to this. I've never been a defund the police type of dude. I'm still not that type of dude. But if that's the case, like, I'm concerned that how is it so easy for people to get in? Like, it blows my mind. A good look. And I can guarantee you, like, that next day, all those officers probably got ripped, because I mean, it's just not a good look that it was that easy to get into the Capitol building.
And you mentioned this earlier. Like, I've been to DC 4 times at this point. I know you have been several times. Like, bro, it's harder to get into the Smithsonian than that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's harder to get into Five Guys by the White House than that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy to me, man. Like, I've never seen anything like it in my life.
And I get it. Like, this is not a time for whatever political side of the aisle that you're on is to point fingers at the other one and say, well, see, look, because I'll tell you that, like, I'm not a person on social media who is immediately going to react to a situation and point my finger and say, see, look at what these people did. Right. Look at what, because, like, and such were some of you. This is what I keep coming back to, is that Romans 2 verse 1 verse is such, and such were some of you. You were just like that. We were just doing that in the spring. But what was the cause of these two protests is because, quite frankly, as a black male in America, I feel like I'm living in a completely different world, because I feel like if there's a bunch of people that look like me that try to get into Capitol building, like I think some bullets would have been sprayed.
Yeah.
And people can say, well, this isn't about race. How is it not about race?
Yeah.
I know there was black people there. That's fine. But for the most part, I mean, they fit the description.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to stop being so ignorant and so scared to talk about the truth. This is the truth of the matter, is that most of these people were white people that came in there, felt emboldened enough, and say that this is my country. I'm going to take it back.
Yep.
And they stormed the Capitol building. Yes, justice is being served. These people are getting arrested as well they should be. But for me, watching that, it was a slap in the face, because I got to see what I saw in the summertime. Look back at our podcast when we interviewed your pastor. All right, and we were talking about the same thing. I was hurt. These riots, all these things were going on, but it was, violence ensued. There's a lot of people who were arrested in these incidents. There was patience, but I look at the other side on January 6th. There's patience, and these are when politicians are in the building.
Yeah.
So I just that's my true feelings about this. I've had it. Like, listen, this is the purpose of this podcast, is to bring people to the table and talk about different discussions, but we like to talk about sports. Look at the logo we got. Like, it's a sports podcast. I don't like talking about politics all the time on here, but when this stuff comes up, I got to address it.
Yeah.
Like,
because here's the thing, though, is that as we've learned doing this podcast, it bleeds into the sports. And it bleeds into every part of our culture. So the second piece of our podcast is a sports and culture podcast. So we got to talk about it. And I think it's so important to understand, like, one thing I want to say is, like, like, me and Devin are imperfect, right? Like, I'm not a perfect person. I have views that are incorrect. At the end of the day, the biggest thing that I strive to do, like, if you can count everything else out, is I try to follow the simple command that Jesus had to love God and to love others. That's the thing at the end of the day that I strive to do. I know that, like, I'm a sinner that needed a savior. And, like, I had like Jesus, like, took that on my behalf, right? Like, I understand that, like, that's where my core is. So my core is the gospel. And I just seek to view everything out of the lens of love God and love others, and just seek to do right. And so in that, I'm emotional. I get messed up in the wrong, ideology sometimes of these other things. But at the end of the day, I claim Jesus. I don't claim to be on one side of the aisle or the other, because they're both sinful parties. They're both sinful organizations. They have sinful people in them that don't know Jesus. And what I have to do as a Christian is I have to acknowledge their sin and try to love them, right? Just like I do with everybody. I don't come out at, somebody I don't know and say, oh, look, you have this sin, I'm going to love you anyway. But, like, at the end of the day, their sin is displayed in the public forum. And so what we can do is see that sin and say, okay, we acknowledge this sin. It's messed up. Like, hey, like, these are not people that you should put on a pedestal and follow. The person that you should put on a pedestal and follow, like, lived 2,000 years ago and died for your sins. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't control these other people's actions.
And that's how we got into the situation that we're in today.
Exactly.
It seems like I'm being, like, super harsh on a group here today, but it's because this party, like, again, claims God and country. There were flags that were waving Jesus 2020.
Yep.
There were flags that were waved in the name of Christianity mixed in with Trumpism. It's bad. It's bad. It's just bad. That's what it is. And this is my last point that I'll make about this. We talk so much in our circles about how destructive critical race theory is. I have spoken out against it myself. If you don't think so, I just wrote a book review about it. Just go on my Goodreads. You can read it. You can read all about how I feel about it. All right. I've been very critical of it. But that is not what seeped into the Capitol Hill building that day.
It is not the biggest threat to American Christianity.
The biggest threat to American Christianity is what? Bad theology. Bad theology is the biggest threat to Christianity right now.
Bad theology and no theology.
Regardless of what you want to call it, it was terrible theology that seeped into the building and emboldened some of these people to do this in the name of Trumpism, Christianity, like meshed in together. It's not a secret. They were waving flags. It were trying to make it known.
Yeah.
So I keep going back to that Romans 2 verses, and such with some of you, but it's the truth. It's the truth. I mean, we look at these other people and we say, look how dirty these people are, and look what they do, look how sinful they are. And not knowing that, like, we all need Jesus at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And
the same.
The second that we take our eyes off of Jesus, we start to do crazy, messed up, depraved stuff. And you start to it gets wicked. So when you're looking at this, like, and I'm preaching to myself here, when I see that sadness and that anger, it needs to turn into prayerfulness and say, thank you, God, that you didn't let me go that far, and worship him correctly and rightly and properly, like how he should be worshiped.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point right in there. And this is something I heard last year that will always stick with me. You can always do more than pray, but you can never do less than pray. Prayer is where we start. It is the most powerful engine, but we have to start the car and go. We have to go and do stuff with that. But at the end of the day, like, we can't do less than pray, and we can't do less than be in our word and to learn more and be more in tune with God, because the more in tune with him we are, the less likely we're to fall to bad speech, to bad teaching, to bad theology, right? At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, is that we have to guard ourselves and ground ourselves in scripture and in prayer. And I can tell you right now that even from a personal perspective, I have a huge opportunity to be better at that. And so that's been my biggest, I wouldn't even call it a resolution. It's a necessity for me, is that I have to, like, get back in that mode of daily, reading and continuing to pray more often throughout the day and be thoughtful about those things.
Not New Year's resolution. It's the New Year's sanctification.
There you go. See, that's the path, though.
Yeah. Good discussion, man. Good discussion.
Always. Well, man, I really appreciate your thoughts on this, man. And just know that, for those of you guys listening, watching this, that we care deeply about these conversations, and we want to have them. We want to engage, and we want to discuss with people that may disagree, as long as we can come to the table and do it civilly. We're happy to do that. We may not do it on the perspective of a podcast. It may be a phone call or a text message or whatever, but, like, do it. Like, let's talk about these things. Let's hash them out. Don't get caught up in your echo chambers. Me too. Speaking to the choir. Don't get caught up in your echo chambers.
Yeah. And while you're at it, and you're on your phones and you're on social media and you're doing all these things, right to the podcast. Yeah. Subscribe to our YouTube page.
Yeah. Subscribe to that YouTube page. Dave and Deb.
Like our page. Tell us what we could be doing better.
Facts.
Find me on social media and let's have a discussion.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, like, we did launch the merch last month. Thank you to everybody that supported us so far. But, like, one of the best things you can do to support us is to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to follow us on Instagram, to follow us on Facebook, to like and share our stuff, comment on it. Like, we appreciate that. Like, we have people that do that every single time we release something. And it's just, that is worth 100 shirts. You know what I'm saying? It's just, we can't ask for anything more.
The ultimate compliment.
Absolutely. Well, brother, I'm super happy for 2021, all the stuff we have in play. I'm excited to be in the mix on the video.
I'm excited that we get to do these podcasts. I get to see you while we're doing this.
Yeah. It makes it a lot better. But yeah, man, shout out to Chris, the producer.
Producer Chris.
Hey. So until next time, brother.
Peace.
Peace.